Okay, in the last video we went over the video that had to do with stiffness and damping, and we had some more dials to play around with on our hair simulation. So the very first one, you really only had a few dials to play with hairs, segment length, and gravity. So gravity was like the first kind of layer of controlling the speed and look of the hair, and then we moved on to the stiffness and dampening features, and you did before and after pictures on that. So you had spring length and spring stiffness and damping feature. Now we're going to move on to a support spring thing, so we'll let them explain what that means and then have our exercise with that. So here we go.
Great work! So far we've built up a model of hair using a series of damped springs. This gives us a more realistic behavior, like this style I came up with. But remember, the art department wants Merida's hair to be curly. Sometimes it curls up while moving, but it doesn't hold that curly shape while at rest. Here's an idea. What if we put some smaller springs in between the larger springs to pull them together? Let's call them support springs. We already have a mathematical model of the spring, so this is easy to test out. If I connect a support spring between the larger springs, I'd get something like this. If I hide the support springs, you'll notice the hair comes to a rest in a curly shape. That's much better. Adding these support springs results in new parameters we can control: the stiffness and length of the support springs. Shorter support springs will give us smaller curls, while really long support springs give us bigger ones. And if we make the support springs have a higher stiffness, the curl pops up like this, kind of like we applied hairspray. Compare this to support springs with lower stiffness. In this case, the curls relax a bit and fall downwards in a natural way. Now, let's try this with a bunch of hairs. Now that's starting to look more like Merida. This isn't exactly the method we used on Merida for the movie, but it's close. In this next interactive, you can try this out with all the parameters we've introduced. The two new parameters are support spring stiffness and support spring length. See what you can come up with.
Okay, so that was an explanation of how support springs can help make that hair model even more realistic. So now we're going to give it a try on our own. So you can see we have lots of dials now, and even different things that we can do. So we can add hairs, we can add springs, and we can add the support springs. And now it's just a matter of getting something that looks realistic. That's not realistic at all. So it's an experimentation thing. Obviously I'm not great at this, but again, you're going to do a before and after picture of this. And you're trying again to get the most realistic hair that you can. So obviously you don't want damping way up at the high end. You don't want support stiffness too much. So it's just a matter of experimentation. Mine looks a little crazy like a horror film, but I'm sure you can do a little better. So experiment with that. And what you're doing again is before picture and after picture. This little button right there, if you wanted to go back to default, that helps you so you can get your before picture. And then you can change these dials and get your after picture. And that should do it. So that's tutorial number 3 to close out that section of simulation, and we'll move on to, I think the next one we'll do has to do with the color stuff. And since we've done some color science, some of this will be review, but also it'll kind of build on what we did before in the first semester and kind of show you how Pixar handles color. So I'll see you back there.